podcast της Athens Voice.
It is the podcast Sundays of the World. My name is Nikos Panagiotou, and together with Christos Fragonikopoulos, we are hosting today our guest speaker, a writer, Bijan Moini, and we will discuss about his book, The Cube, that is going to be presented in the International Book Fair of Thessaloniki, into an event funded and promoted from Goethe Institut. Bijan, thank you for being with us. We would like to ask you to start by saying a few things and introducing actually the Cube to our listeners.
Sure. Thanks for having me. First of all, I'm very glad to speak to you. And The Cube is a near future novel. So it plays in a near future Berlin, where the cube, an artificial intelligence, is sort of not governing and not controlling all humans in Germany, but rather steering them. So everything, all the data that now goes to Facebook and Google and the like, runs through the cube, and the cube is making calculations and allocating resources, and is in particular trying to forecast what people are going to do next. And the better it can predict one person's future, the higher their predictability score, their Pret score, as it's called. And the higher the Pret score, the more privileges you have, such as a higher basic income, a better job, better friends, better conversations, and all that. And the story is about one guy, Tazo, who is an outsider in this world. He's called a trickster because he's constantly trying to trick the cube into not being able to calculate and not being able to predict his future. And therefore his predictability score is really low. And he's trying to revolt against the system when he meets a woman, Dalia, who is also an outsider, just like him, but who is striving towards the system and who wants to integrate, and who is now challenging his views of the cube and this world he's living in.
Thank you. My question comes here, and it is related with how come you named it The Cube?
There are different reasons for that. First, in Germany, the word for cube and for dice is the same. So when you play with dice, the cube is the symbol for total randomness. So you have kind of it's impossible to predict what the dice will show when you throw them. But the cube on the other side on the other hand, is a perfect geometric form. So it is actually one of the best. It is very easy to calculate. That was the kind of the dilemma that I wanted to paint, or not the dilemma, but the opposite sides of this one symbol. And then there's another thing in IT, in information technology, a cube represents a certain amount of data. So that was another analogy that I wanted to introduce.
Yeah. And if I am not mistaken, this book was written before the pandemic, the outbreak of the pandemic, yes?
Yeah, it was published in 2019 in Germany. So yes, well ahead of it.
So now that we have the experience of the pandemic on our back, perhaps, what you are saying about the cube might sound, like as if you were a prophet, because what we saw during the pandemic, we saw that life was made easier due to information technology, yes? We saw that life was made easier because of the internet. What do I mean by easier? Life did not stop because of the internet, okay? We could detect infections, in real time. Some countries introduced digital surveillance, all that, And in general, information technology, in a way, made societies more resilient, today than they would be 100 or 200 or 300 years ago if you had a pandemic, yes? So life could go on, an entire country or the entire globe could go on, despite the fact that it was in a lockdown, But the question is, how often do we think about this, Because why this is important to think about it, Everything stopped. The internet did not stop. The internet did not break down. So, this creates a few questions for the future, If you are able to use digital surveillance tools to find out, if the lockdown is functioning, who has been infected, and so on, It raises a few questions for about the future. For example, will governments be willing to use such digital applications in order, especially the rich governments, of the rich countries, of the powerful countries of the world, in order to shape values and interests of the people, to shape their life, This is questions we can think about, and I think your book does, make us think in that way. I don't know. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think you've already painted the two sides of the coin pretty nicely. That technology is, on the one hand, a big opportunity, and on the other hand, maybe even bigger risk. And to balance the two is always the challenge that we have. And the pandemic is a very good example of it, because technology, on the one hand, gave us tools, as you said, in order to bridge the divide that's been built up by restrictions, by being unable to see each other, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it gave instruments, at least in theory, to attack, to oppose the pandemic itself. In Germany, for instance, probably in Greece, you have something similar. There's an app that most people have installed on their smartphones that tries to detect whether you are meeting with someone who that later turns out to have COVID. And on the other hand, there are two very frightening developments as well. One, you've already touched this, is that the many governments, such as the Hungarian government or the Chinese government, are using this time in order to introduce instruments, technological weaponry that they claim is supposed to oppose the pandemic, but can and will be used for other means right after the pandemic is over, for sure. And on the other hand, we have a tendency to overestimate what technology can actually achieve. And again, an example is the German Corona app that many people claimed, okay, this is going to be a game changer, and we need this to gather as much information as possible, and this and that must be integrated. And it turns out that even in China, what worked best in the end was people in offices ringing up other people, contact persons of people that turned out to have COVID, and that worked much more effectively than the Corona app, because the Corona app was deficient in many ways. And so these are the two things that I want to raise awareness of, that we tend to overestimate what technology actually can do, and we tend to overlook the capacities that it's building for authoritarian regimes in particular to be used against us.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, even in democratic societies, you have to be very careful as to who you are going to elect, and give power to. But what struck me in your book is the fact that you could not, be like the rest who were willing to provide their data. Yes?
Yeah.
You decide to become like the rest when you fall in love, as in the case of your book. And then in the end, when you revolt, you cannot revolt. You are put back into the cube. Yes, if I'm not wrong, this was more or less the conclusion. So, but what would you say? What can be done? How can you collect data on people without wanting to manipulate them or control them, how can you make sure, that, data can be used in both ways? In other words, yes, increase surveillance when it is needed, like, when you have a pandemic, but at the same time, allow citizens and civil society to use digital technology to control power, to control government, political parties, to make them more accountable, Yeah. Because I think, that what you are trying to say is that we are physical beings, we are not machines. And our feelings, our actions, and things like that cannot be digitalized, And, being a human is different than being, a machine. We need to be able to touch each other. We need to be able to love, each other, to kiss, to hug each other, we need to be able to debate, to disagree, the essential, the fundamental things, and we need to protect all that.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about that? Applications and the internet cannot replace, the basic fundamental social activity, as Aristotle would say, which is politics.
Yeah, well, that's again being shown by the pandemic, right? Everyone was waiting for it to end. It's not like all these virtual realities or all these Zoom conferences can replace what personal interaction means to people. So you're absolutely right on that. I would disagree on one point, which is how far it is possible to digitalize humans. I agree with you that it's not possible on an individual level, but on a mass level, it is pretty easy. So you can, as Facebook, when you have enough data, try one thing with 100 people, and you will nudge two of them with a high probability. You will nudge two of them to do exactly what you wanted. You can't know who exactly it will be, but that power alone, that you can change the opinions of maybe 2% of the population, can make a huge difference. For instance, in a system like the US-American system, where only a few tens of thousands of votes can change the presidential election. But coming back to the question you asked, what can we do? I think there are two answers to that. The first is prevention, and the second is regulation, and they go hand in hand, of course. So what I try to do with my novel, and that is the privilege of fiction, is I try to look very far into the future and just paint one version of it, which maybe scares a few people, I hope at least, although I don't think I really wrote a dystopian book, but rather it is utopian in many respects, because there's no bad power controlling the cube or anything. I can say as much. But what I can show is what a world will look like in which an AI, an artificial intelligence, knows my every move, my every next move. And we are tending towards such a society. And when we see this, we can, of course, try to prevent this from happening. Because as you pointed out in my book, in The Cube, it's already too late to stop the system. The cube has already put hold of society, in society, and it's impossible to stop it then. But you can stop things now, and that's where regulation comes in. And basically, for instance, forbidding IT companies to do certain things, such as to build up individual profiles of us, to manipulate us, to nudge us to, for instance, vote for X, Y, Z, that can actually bring us a long way. And luckily, in the European Union, we are still in a position where we can set these rules and expect them to be followed, because as of now, we are still powerful enough to have them adhere to these regulations.
But is it easy? I was reading yesterday, for example, a report published by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and this report indicates that just 12 anti-vaxxers, who own significant, very strong companies and sell relative products against the corona and the vaccine. They sell therapies, conspiracy theories, and so on, are responsible for, these 12 people for almost 2/3 of anti-vaccine content, in the United States. And they make a profit of about $35 million a year, and they have about 65 million followers.
Let me ask...
in 95% of those cases of their, of their activity, the big companies have done nothing to remove or, to limit or whatever the content.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there would be a radical solution. I'm not suggesting it because it's problematic on the other end of the discussion. But of course, you could, for instance, if you declare them liable for what they are spreading or helping to spread, and then that would be a total game changer, because then you would change their economic calculation, their business calculation instantly. So there are tools. I'm not saying this is the perfect tool, but of course you can. I mean, having these social media networks is not a given. If they turn out to be too destructive to society, you could simply forbid them. Of course, I'm not saying you should, but we are authors in this as a society. We decide what we want. And we have now been at, 10, 20 years almost of these platforms. And rightly so, there's a lot of criticism, and we're always a little bit too late with regulation, but have not yet lost trust in our capability and also in our readiness to regulate these companies, because it's really, really important, as you've just pointed out.
Bijan, having written The Cube, how did you felt when you heard about metaverse? Mark Zuckerberg announcing metaverse. Do you think that it is actually lead us to another kind of reality or bigger challenges to regulate these big techs and also algorithms?
I'm pretty sure that for the very reason that Christos just pointed out, metaverse won't function the way that Mark Zuckerberg intends it to, because in the end, people will always value personal interaction more compared to virtual communication and also being together. I mean, the level of technology you would need in order to replace that, just a simple thing such as a touch, requires so much and also so much effort on the part of the people that this may work for, long distance relationships in order to bridge the divide you have when you're apart for a couple of months. But it will never replace just being with friends in close proximity and laugh together and spend a few more minutes together than you originally planned, and that metaverse allows you to. And so for that very simple reason, I don't really believe it will work the way that he intends it to, but that doesn't mean that it won't be a big thing. So it could be a big thing, for instance, if you imagine you go shopping on Fifth Avenue in New York and you try on things and they actually look like you are wearing them and you can order them easily. It may be cooler and more fun for a lot of people than just going to Amazon and having these lists and endless lists of things that you can buy or not buy. So in certain regards, it could add a personal touch and therefore enhance people's experience and then work, but not the way he intends it to as a parallel universe. I don't think that.
Okay. I would like also to ask you, what about the algorithms? Do you think that we need actually to implement safety nets, as you mentioned before, that the European Union did in order to be able to protect our personal data?
Yeah, totally. I really believe we should. one point that I touched before was having profiles of us being being designed at Facebook and at Google and all these companies. I think that is really problematic because it gives companies a key to our inner self that they shouldn't have and that they don't need in order to provide the service that they are claiming to provide us. So for a social network to work, they don't require to have a profile of me, a personal profile of me. They need this in order to get more for the ads that they are showing me, because they can then claim that the companies that buy these ads will get more traction from them. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessary for the service. And I think we need to readjust what these companies can do with our data and align it more with our interests in their services. And if that means that Facebook doesn't earn as much or could even ask for, I don't know, a fee of 1 or 2 euros per month for the network, I think that would be a huge advantage, a huge opportunity for us as consumers, because that would finally lead to some competition and to other networks having a chance to provide, I don't know, for instance, a system that is more sensitive to our personal data, and therefore ask for a little bit more money and have compete with Facebook on that level.
Christos, the final question.
Other questions. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the conversation. We have to. This is something that can be very beneficial, technology, but at the same time, because as human history has shown, we need to create new gods and new religions. It might get out of control.
Yeah, I'm always comparing it to the environment. There's been so much stuff that is detrimental to the environment, and we just forbid it. And there is no more lead in our pencils, for instance, because it's just hurting people.
If you read the book by Yuval Harari, not Homo sapiens or the 21st lessons for the 21st century, but the other one, Homo Deus, a history of the future, if we suppose that our aim is to live longer, to have more happiness and so on, what is to stop us from, doing that through technology, and what effect that might have? So we need to be very, very, very careful.
But let's close our discussion today with something optimistic.
Of course, what we have been saying does not mean in no way that we are supportive of all these conspiratorial arguments, regarding Bill Gates, 5G and things like this. No, okay?
Of course not.
Exactly.
What we are saying is that we need to weigh in, the benefits, the disadvantages, so as to be able to have a better life, to be more free, more productive, more creative, and things like that.
Yeah, and also to have the self-confidence to rein in big companies. I think we need to regain that trust in ourselves that some things are just not to be done by big companies, and some things they should not control. And our inner selves are one of those things, I believe.
And trust in our societies. It was the podcast Sundays in the World, offered from Athens Voice Official. Today we would like to thank our guest, Bijan Moini, that we will have the pleasure to listen to him on the presentation of his book, The Cube, that it will be presented Saturday on 27th of November. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Ήταν ένα podcast από την Athens Voice. μπορείτε να ακούσετε τα podcast της Athens Voice στο athensvoice.gr και στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcast και το Google Play Music.